Hey guys, welcome back, it's Ripe again, back with another Just No HOA story. In this video, an entitled homeowner association president insisted that I must pay missed past dues for violating HOA bylaws, even though my newly purchased property is not even part of the HOA. Here is what happened, let's dive right into the video. You could say I'm a bit of a country girl. I grew up on a small family farm, so when I had an opportunity to purchase the perfect plot of land out in the country, I jumped on it. My little slice of paradise was on the outskirts of a small town with tons of charm. They had an adorable strip of ma and pa shops, a little supermarket and not much else, and that suited me perfectly. My land was an empty country acre at the end of a dirt road minutes outside of the small town. The plot was beautiful and there were plenty of trees but enough shade to make the picture of the yard just perfect. The land was empty, so I hired house builders. I was so excited to start my country daydream that I visited the construction site every day while the house was being finished. Finally, the house was move-in ready. I put up a chicken coop immediately after moving in and had plans to add a stable the next year. It felt so great to move back to the country. It only took a few weeks to settle in, and I loved the open air and driving into the little town to meet my new community. The locals really seemed to like me. The woman who owned the hardware store even told me about an upcoming town party. I couldn't believe how easy life there was, and it was like all my small town dreams had come true. 2 Sundays after moving, I unpacked my last box. I felt perfect, it was like all my hard work finally paid off and I was living my dream. I decided to celebrate finishing the unpacking by treating myself to a nice home-cooked meal, all prepared in my new picturesque little farmhouse. I made a grocery list and started out the door to go to the supermarket, but before I left the property, I decided to check the mail. I walked down the long dirt driveway to my rural mailbox. I opened the box and pulled out a small stack of letters. It gave me a little thrill to see my new address printed on my mail, even if it was mostly junk, but then something caught my eye. It was a hand-addressed letter among the bills and ads. My curiosity piqued, so I tore it open as I walked back to the car. The letter opened nicely but then turned sour quickly. It read, "Dear Miss Barker, welcome to the town of Willow Brook. We are so glad to have you. If you should ever have a concern, please reach out to me, John, your neighborly HOA president. Although I am so excited to welcome you to town, I'm also writing with some unpleasant news. Unfortunately, your property at 14 Creek Bend Lane has fallen delinquent in HOA dues. Due to 10 years of unpaid dues, the delinquency has reached a criminal level. To settle your account, please pay $10,000 immediately. Failure to pay these dues may result in collection, eviction, and criminal charges. Please mail the payments to the address below. Sincerely, John Frank, HOA President." I stopped dead in my tracks. What the heck is this? I said out loud, as if the heavens would answer me. All of my joy and pride over the successful move were completely forgotten. The letter totally rocked my world. I forgot entirely about my celebratory dinner. Instead, I punched the return address from the letter into my GPS, and before I knew it, it was driving to John Frank's house. Throughout the short drive, I imagined myself being perfectly nice and explaining that the letter must have been a mistake or something. I've always seen myself as a people's person, so I was sure the HOA president would be reasonable. Maybe we could sort this whole mess out today. After a few moments of driving, the GPS announced that my destination was on the right. I pulled into the driveway of a modest ranch house. It struck me as a little odd that Mr. Frank was using his personal residence as an official HOA address, and well, I stepped up to the door and knocked. A moment later, a bemused-looking man in his 50s opened the door. "Mr. Frank?" I said. "Yes," he replied. "Hi, I'm Amy Barker. I live at 14 Creek Bend," I said, holding out my hand to shake. "And?" he replied, ignoring my hand. I was a little taken aback already. I was all smiles and niceties. I couldn't imagine what this man had against me already. "Well, I received a letter from you." I held up the letter and I just had some concerns. "Would you happen to have a moment to chat?" "I don't, and I don't think it's decent to show up on someone's front porch on Sunday to harass them," he snapped. "Hey, I'm sorry, I only came here because it was the address on this business-related mail. I didn't expect it to be a residence and I'm not trying to harass anyone. I'm being nice here." "Nice?" he said snidely. "Nice would be paying your fees on time, Mrs. Barker. You see, that's the thing, so I just bought the land and there were no back fees disclosed during the sale. There must be a mistake or something," I said, trying to keep my cool. "The only mistake was you coming here. Please leave my doorstep before I have to call the authorities," he said. "Really?" I said, and he said nothing in response, just crossing his arms. I couldn't believe it. I stared him down, but he didn't back down, and finally I threw my arms up and walked away. He was clearly unreasonable, and there was something shady about his whole attitude. Why treat me like that? I wondered out loud as I drove home. There was something fishy about that guy. I was not sure what it was, but I was gonna do some digging into him. I spent the next few days searching for Mr. Frank online and asking around about him in town. To my surprise, he had a bit of local notoriety, and not in a good way. Around the small town of Willowbrook, Mr. Frank was known as a bit of a con artist. According to my new neighbors, the president had always new get-rich-quick schemes brewing, and practically everyone who did deals with him seemed to end up burned. My friend at the hardware store even wondered if he was really associated with the HOA. "You don't mean that?" I asked her. "Oh honey, you're still new in town, but everyone around here knows to stay away from Mr. Frank," she said. I nodded. "Thanks." My mind was reeling as I left the hardware store, and then it finally clicked. This is all a scam. The letter, the threats, all of it was made up by him so he could make a quick buck. I would not give him 1 cent. In fact, I wouldn't give him or his threats the time of day. I vowed then and there to forget all about him, but unfortunately, fate had other plans. The next morning my phone rang. It was an unknown number, but I chanced it and answered anyway. "Hello?" I said. "Mrs. Barker?" The voice on the other line said. "This is the HOA president calling in regards to your severely delinquent fees." My blood turned to ice. I couldn't believe he was calling me, but I was done playing nice here. I said, "Oh hello, yes, I'm aware of your attempt to collect from me. I'm also aware that you're full of it. I figured it all out, Mr. Frank, and I know about your HOA scam. I'm not giving you a single dollar." There was silence on the other end, and then, "Well, you leave me no other choice but to sue you." "Sue?" I laughed. "You have no grounds to sue. In fact, I'm gonna report you for misconduct. I'm reporting you to the HOA, the police, and heck, maybe even the state attorney general." "You wouldn't do that," he said. "Oh yes, I would. You messed with the wrong homeowner here, and frankly, from what I've heard, you had this coming to you. Goodbye, Mr. Frank," I said, and I hung up without letting him get another word in. It felt great to hang up on him. I don't like being small, but this guy was a creep, and for better or worse, now that he called, I could start putting him in the past. I would file the appropriate reports, move on with my life, and let him pay for his fraud, but once again, fate had other plans in mind. 3 days later, while at work, I got a notification from my home security system. One of the cameras had caught some irregular motion. I hopped on the app and found the current camera feeds. I have 3 cameras, one in the driveway, one pointed at the chicken coop, and one at the front door, and the front door and the driveway seemed to be clear, but the chicken camera showed a scene of pure chaos. I watched in horror as a person spray-painted obscenities on the outside of my chicken coop. The chickens seemed scared. They were running around like mad, having obviously been disturbed by this invader. I was shocked and furious. "Who the F is it?" I said under my breath. The vandal had their back to me. I watched for another moment, and just as I was about to stop watching and call the police, the vandal turned to face the camera. And I gasped. I knew that face. First I called the police, and then I called my friend from the hardware store. She agreed to come with me to the station. I told the police everything I knew about Mr. Frank, and from the threatening letter and phone call to the horrible vandalism of my home. My friend attested to past negative experiences with Mr. Frank, and she gave the police a list of potential witnesses they could reach out to. "I have to say thank you, ladies," the cop said, shaking each of our hands in turn. "These are very serious misdeeds your little HOA president has been up to, and it will be a pleasure to put an end to this fraud and theft." I grinned. A thank you was not much, but it felt good to be a part of stopping this crooked man's racket. "I'm happy to help," I said. "Would you be willing to help one more time?" the officer asked. "Of course," I said, so the officer had to give an official statement on the whole ordeal. I sat in a quiet room with him and a tape recorder. We ran through some questions about my dealings with Mr. Frank, and I even got a little emotional describing how his harassment has made me feel unsafe, but it was worth it because my pain would help put him away. I left the station that day feeling relieved, and Mr. Frank would pay and I would get my country dream back. I went home and assessed the damage to the coop. It would take a whole weekend to clean up the damage, and the poor birds were traumatized. Anyway, a month later I found out Mr. Frank was charged with fraud, extortion, and racketeering for his little HOA charade. He tried to plead guilty to avoid a harsh sentence, but the judge listened to all witness testimony and decided that my painful testimony, among others he had grifted, was enough to hold him financially accountable and put him behind bars for a short stint. It felt like catharsis. When I moved to Willowbrook, I was seeking a quiet country life, but thanks to this flim-flam man, I had nothing but drama since I arrived. Finally, all the ups and downs were over. It brought me peace to know that justice was served. I smiled as I looked at my newly painted chicken coop, and at long last I relaxed in my perfect country dream life. And the next one is titled Karma Revenge. So this weekend I was supposed to pick up my mom from my grandparents' place since my dad was out of town and the place is 100 kilometers away from our city. My mom has a driver's license but doesn't drive, and since I don't trust my car to leave the city with it, I proceed to take my dad's car that he left at home to go pick up mom. Since I would not be using my own car for the duration, I decided to give it to my girlfriend to go shopping and such while I am gone. So we wake up Sunday morning, we live together, get in my car, and I drive us to my parents' place to pick up my dad's car. I leave in my dad's car and girlfriend leaves in mine. I don't even make it out of the city and I get a call from her asking if I could come back since she had been in an accident. I head back since the site of the accident was at the very end of the street we lived on. Once I get there, I find out that once she reached the end of the street, she made a right turn and hit the first two cars parked on the right. Honestly, I didn't know how to contain my laughter. I mean, hitting a parked car? No. Two parked cars? That takes skill. So I proceeded to talk with the owners of the cars and offered to pay for everything. Since my girlfriend was at fault, I had no problem going to the police. Except for the 3 to 6 hour waiting time every time you go to the accidents department, but offered to fill out a amiable form. That's something we have in my country where if you have an accident, both sides just fill out the form and be on their way without contacting the police. I live in the capital city and we get lots of accidents on a daily basis. Since it was Sunday and all the insurance places were closed, I could not acquire such a form, so I proceeded to let them photograph my insurance, exchanged phone numbers and assured them that we were neighbors and that tomorrow, Monday, I would contact them with the form to fill it out. All is fine and I leave for my grandparents' place. On the way there, I contact a friend that works for insurance and he mails me a form along with a reference for a service station that would have their cars repaired in a day. I proceed to call the guys and tell them that I'll be back in a couple of hours with the form and we will get everything settled today. To this, one of the guys says, in his position he is entitled to go to the police, so he'll be waiting for us there should we decide to come. This is where I pulled a 180. I was trying to be a decent human being and repair the damage my girlfriend caused, and this guy wanted to waste 3 to 6 hours of my Sunday because he felt entitled. Fine, at this point it may be useful to mention that I have studied law to a master's degree, have the degree, and have been working at law firms for over 5 years, so I pretty much know the law better than the cops. Karma starts to kick in. I call the guys on the way back from my grandparents and ask them to grab a copy of the form that needs to be filled out for me as well. These forms have a number order on them and first come first serve. They tell me they cannot since there's only one per person. This is BS, I know this for a fact. When you ask for such a form, the cops even ask if the other party is here to give one for them too. Anyway, regardless, I get there after they'd been waiting for about 3 hours and request a form. They had numbers 56, 57 and I had 89. Mind you, each case takes about 20 to 30 minutes, lazy people. So when their numbers come up, I was just getting my form and as they enter the office I also enter and ask the cop, I'm also a part of this incident as it was a 3-way accident. Should I not also be here when you talk to the other 2 parts? The cop proceeds to tell the guys to go out of his office and come back when all 3 of us have filled out the report. Guys proceed to wait another 30 minutes for my girlfriend to fill out the report and then we all go in once she is done. Now we get to the core of the problem, the most incompetent police officer I have ever seen. I'm sure even those among you with no legal background or knowledge will see how pathetic this guy is. People who filed reports, the other 2 guys, one of them did not even have a driver's license because it was his mom's car and his girlfriend filled the report. The other guy had a driver's license and filed his report, although the car belonged to his parents. This is relevant since the only people legally allowed to file that report is either the owner of the car or the person driving it at the time, which none of these 2 were. Cop finds my girlfriend guilty, as she truly was, and then proceeds to fill out the paperwork. I ask him, Officer, do you know the regulations for parking on the street this incident happened on? No. And do you not think it's relevant to the case? Now, I don't remember exactly what he said, but it was all gibberish, ending up with, "You really dislike cops, don't you?" To which I answer, I dislike incompetent individuals in any profession. He ends up getting his way since he was the authority in the situation and proceeded to ticket my girlfriend and hand the guys copies of my insurance to get their cars fixed. Added small detail I left out, cop did not take pictures of the damaged cars as is mandatory by law for any case that comes across his desk. He literally has no evidence an accident ever happened apart from the word of the two other guys. I'm sure that any policeman reading this would have a field day. Cue the karma. As soon as I get home, I start to do exactly what society and my profession taught me, which is sue him. I filed the lawsuit on Monday and got a date in 4 months. Litigation in non-penal cases is very slow in my country. Usual time to finish a lawsuit is anywhere between 1 to 8 years, depending on how much your lawyer wants to push it. The thing is that she was in fact at fault, and had they just taken me up on my offer and not wasted my time, they would have had their cars fixed by now, Tuesday, but they were entitled, so they went to the police. Here is a fact for you guys. Parking regulations on that street, as any other for a matter of fact, state that cars should be parked parallel to the sidewalk. Not on it, not perpendicular, just parallel. The street has a few apartment buildings, so there's nowhere near enough parking places, so the neighbors made the convention to park perpendicular to the sidewalk to fit more cars. In fact, taking up a whole lane of traffic, but that's another story. The thing with conventions is that it's all fine and dandy until something happens and the police get involved. And then law states you must take responsibility for what happened. So basically, there's no chance whatsoever that we will lose the lawsuit, and I will even drag it out as much as possible. I'm thinking I could get it up to 4 to 5 years, no problem. Now, another kink is a law that states that any item that is under litigation does not produce legal effects. In translation, this means that until the judge gives a verdict to my lawsuit, the ticket is suspended, so the guys will not be able to fix their cars, not even on their own dime. It is somewhat assimilated to evidence, but at a much lower scale. Also, once the process is over, not only will I not be paying for their repair, they will be paying for mine. My main argument in the lawsuit is a legal concept known as causality link, which applied to my case. It means, yes, my girlfriend caused an accident, but that accident was caused by you parking your cars illegally. If you would have parked legally, there would have been more room, your car would not have been in that spot and thus would have not been hit, regardless of my girlfriend's actions. So basically, your action of parking perpendicular caused the damage to my car. And yeah, Ripe Stars, I gotta say, this person would definitely be handy to have as a friend, or in this case, boyfriend. Props to him for knowing the law inside and out. And now let's move on to the next story. It starts like this. When you work in retail, you get used to the idea pretty quickly that there will be many Karen customers. The ones who want to complain and throw a fit thinking they will get a discount or get to return something that they shouldn't be allowed to. The things that I have enough stories for during my time working in retail and then owning my own store, I could fill a book with them. I did not think that the biggest Karen though I would meet on my retail journey would be another employee. Not only that, but it would be after I was an owner, meaning my own employee was the one that decided to be a Karen at me. I would like to point out that it is a decently sized chain store, so I could easily imagine an employee not knowing that I was the owner. Usually, it takes a while before I meet everybody, or they find out some other way who I am. I'm almost always working on the floor and wear the same kind of uniform that all the employees do. I have a mindset that just because I own the store, that doesn't make me a better person than anyone else working there. No matter if they are a manager or a teenager that got a job checking people out. Karen somehow slipped under the radar of me noticing her and her ever finding out who I was. Either way, she was promoted to being a manager after our old one went on maternity leave and then informed us that she wouldn't be coming back afterwards. I usually split the responsibility of hiring and promoting with somebody else, and he was the one that promoted Karen. On paper, she looked qualified and ready for a promotion, so I have no blame or bad feelings towards the person who promoted her. For some people, a little bit of power goes way to their head, and for Karen, it did that immediately. I heard whispers of employees talking about a manager always yelling at them and telling them they were doing things wrong and could get fired for that. Keep in mind, managers at my store have zero firing power, so she knew that what she was saying was all complete lies to scare employees. I had no idea who they were talking about at the time though, and planned to get to the bottom of it and talk privately with those employees. I found out later it was Karen, but not before I had my own interaction with her. So I went outside to have a smoke break. Perk of being the boss is I can give myself a break, and right after I lit my cigarette, Karen came outside too. Karen, what the hell do you think you're doing? Me, I think it's pretty obvious that I'm having a cigarette break. Karen, I didn't authorize you to go on a break. Me, I don't need any authorization to go on a break. Didn't you not know that? I was starting to figure out that she might not have known who I was, but she was not gonna shut up long enough for me to keep talking and tell her. Karen, plus you cannot smoke while on the shift. I can take you into the office right now and have you fired for smoking. I am banning all employees from smoking those disgusting things starting right now. She then proceeded to slap the cigarette right out of my mouth, and I was in shock for a moment. Also, I'm well aware about the dangers of smoking and that it is bad for my health. My point in this is she had no right to dictate what anybody could or couldn't do outside of the store. I was angry about her throwing hands and slapping me. Me, that does it. I think we're going back to the main office because I have some papers to file to have you fired. Karen, please, you're a nobody. I'm a manager here and that means I'm the boss of you. Nobody is gonna believe you over me. Me, you really have no clue about anything, do you? I own the damn store and you just had the nerve to put hands on me. I promise that you will leave this building fired within the next hour. You can decide if it is by choice or by being dragged out by security. I think she still didn't believe that I was the owner and we both went into the back office area together. She just sat in silence as I logged onto my computer and started typing away for the paperwork I needed. I think that it is then when it clicked and she started apologizing to me and saying that she didn't know who I was. That she was trying to be a good manager and not let lower employees break rules. I did not care about anything she had to say because I knew she was about to be fired. I had something urgent on my computer and I was glad that it clicked before I finished with Karen. It was a report about an employee being attacked by another one in the store, and attached was a video from the security. I could see Karen clear as day hitting another employee in the head for reasons I didn't know and did not need to know. All that mattered was she abused her power and had broken the law by assaulting my employee. She did not know what I was looking at, so I told her to wait in my office and I would be back. I ended up locking her in before calling the cops and tracking down the employee in the video. I started apologizing to him and telling him that Karen was being fired and police were coming to arrest her for assault as we spoke. I told him that if any manager yells at him or any other employee, I want him to come and find me because I don't allow that kind of behavior. I asked if he would be willing to talk to the police about what happened, and he agreed. I also let him know after that I was sending him home for the rest of the day fully paid, as well as the store paying any medical bill if he felt he had to get checked out by a doctor. Karen put 2 and 2 together and possibly looked at my computer and saw the video. She was banging on the door and screaming to be let out and that she was being held against her will. Where I am, I had a right to hold her in my office until police arrived since she was considered a threat. Her behavior when they came showed that she was a threat, so she wouldn't be able to claim any different. The employee talked to the police and Karen was dragged out of the store in handcuffs. And by the way, Ripe Stars, I had to censor a large portion of the post there because there was just too much information about OP, and it would be kind of easy to identify who OP potentially is, and I don't want to dox anybody in my videos. Either way, fortunately, we also have an update to the story. Update to the story. I know you have all been dying to hear an update about the Karen manager situation, so here it is. A lot has happened since I last shared my experience, and I must admit I completely forgot to mention one very important detail. I of course also pressed charges against Karen for assaulting me during our infamous encounter. So after the whole ordeal, I went down to the police station to file my report and give my statement. I provided them with a copy of our security footage, which clearly showed Karen slapping the cigarette out of my mouth and hitting me. It turns out this was not her first rodeo. She had a history of getting aggressive with other coworkers, but somehow managed to always wiggle her way out of trouble. Well, not this time. The legal process took a few months, but I was determined to make sure Karen faced the consequences of her actions. As I mentioned before, the other employee she assaulted also pressed charges, and we joined forces to build a solid case against her. Our combined evidence was overwhelming, and Karen could not talk her way out of this one. So the day finally came for the trial, and I was there to testify alongside my brave employee. It was nerve-wracking, but we were both steadfast in our commitment to justice. And it paid off. The jury found Karen guilty of assault on both counts. As a result, she was sentenced to jail time and required to attend anger management classes. The look on Karen's face when the verdict was read, I cannot even describe it. It was a mix of shock, disbelief, and a realization that her reign of terror had come to an end. And while I don't take pleasure in someone else's misery, it felt good to know that my employee and I had put a stop to her abuse. As for my store, things have been running smoothly since Karen's departure. I've taken extra care to ensure that our new managers are respectful, competent, and supportive of their teams. My employees know they can come to me with any concerns and I will always have their backs. And yeah, Ripe Stars, I am so glad that the story ended on a good note. Karen got exactly what bullies like her deserve. In addition, it's so good to see that OP stands up for his employees and he seems to be a really good boss. Props to him and his team. And yeah guys, if you cannot get enough of my content, please don't forget to check out my podcast by searching for Ripe Stories on all major podcast platforms such as Spotify, Apple or Google Podcasts. Furthermore, you can find bonus content by going to patreon.com/ripeyoutube or by clicking the join button here on YouTube. For a small monthly fee, you will get access to dozens and dozens of exclusive videos you won't find anywhere else. Thank you so much for watching and I hope to see you again tomorrow.